Hello, I'm Jay with Volunteer Audio. Today we're making a video to show you how to install our Hertz Stage 2 full install kit. We're gonna cover how to flash your motorcycle to correct the EQ curve of your factory radio, how to install your amplifier as well as your front speakers, and have you prepared if you decide to later to add on the rear speakers. We're gonna go over what comes in our kit and then step by step how to install it on your bike, so you can do this yourself and get the best results possible. All right, so we're going to try to do our best to show you the before and after of how loud this stock radio is compared to our two-speaker add-on. Now, our two-speaker add-on is going to add an amplifier. It's also going to add front speakers. That same amp could easily add up to 6 additional speakers or 4 pairs. We use that Hertz HMP 4D amplifier. So this is a stock radio, no amp. It seems to have aftermarket speakers. We'll learn what they are when we take it apart, but I think we'll still have a pretty good comparison of why it's here, how it's not loud, and how loud it'll be when we're done. So what we've got set up, I've got an RTA with an SPL meter on my laptop, and we've put a microphone right at the rear of the motorcycle. So we're going to do this same exact test before and after. I'm actually going to use this radio turned all the way up, and we're going to put it on a peak hold setting, so the number over here on this computer will be the loudest we've got playing this song. So we're going to play 30 seconds, 45 seconds, whatever it takes to get to the louder portion of this song, see how loud this bike is. I'll press hold so to hold the loudest volume. So me talking is about 58, actually I just hit 66 decibel. So I'm not talking very loud in this room, but 66 dB is where we're reading without any music playing. Every 3 decibel we increase sounds twice as loud to our ears. So let's get this playing. This is going to be some copyright-free music. It's all that we're allowed to play, and you get to actually hear this on YouTube. That should be enough to kind of give you an idea. We've got 84.8 decibel. Can you see that? 84.8 decibel is what we've got shown on our screen. That is our peak volume that we got out of the system before we did our upgrade. So now I'm going to walk you through all the steps on how to do this upgrade, and at the end we'll listen to it again. All right, so I'm going to show you the very first step. You should always flash the radio first. I'm going to show you how to access that port. First step we're going to do is remove our side bag. So just remove your bag off the bike. Now if you have lights added to the bag, make sure you unplug those connectors to make sure that you don't damage those wires or mess your lights up. All right, so after you've got your bag off, we did that so we could access the fuse box cover, this side panel on the side of the bike. All right, so let's remove that. So as you saw, you just get a hold of that panel and you just pull out. It's just got pressure fit clips. So behind this panel, you're going to find your diagnostic port where you're going to hook up your computer. It's actually going to be this lower one here. There's going to be a factory block off in it. On a 14 to 20, you're going to have a 6-pin gray connector. On a 21 and newer, your connector is going to be red, and it's going to be plugged into a very similar port. All right, this one is a 16, so as you see, we have this gray 6-pin connector. All right, so let's talk about our computer now and show you how to flash it. All right, so let me show you what you're going to get if you decide to rent your programmer from us. Now, you don't have to rent a programmer to get this done. You could find a techno research dealer, and you could have them flash your radio, and you wouldn't have to rent one and go through having to have a computer. I want to make sure that we're clear. You cannot get what I'm fixing to show you done at a Harley dealership. Now, maybe your Harley dealer has bought a techno research tuner. That would be the only way. That's not normal. The regular Harley scan tool was locked out last year. So the only way they could do this would be if you actually had the boom audio system installed on the bike, and the computer has to see those amplifiers before it will unlock this feature on the Harley compatible or Harley dealership scan tool. So here's what you're going to get from us though. So if you decide to rent the tool, this doesn't come in every kit. This is only optional if you rent it. We also sell it if you wanted to own one. You're going to get this little pouch. Inside of it is going to be directions. It's going to show you exactly where to go online. And with your PC, it does have to be a PC. It's not Apple supported yet. Get a PC laptop or desktop. You're going to download the software. It's right here on here. It's Centurion /audio /Maximus /Alaris. All of them have the same information here at technoresearch.com. This is a one-time use tool. When we send it out, it's going to have a license to use on your bike. Make all the adjustments you want to do while it's connected, because once you disconnect it, it will no longer work on your bike unless we pay for an additional license. This is the cheapest way for you to own a tool and only pay for it as you need it, instead of paying a very large yearly license and buying a more expensive tool to do multiple bikes. We sell both versions if you're interested. So on this particular bike we're doing today, it's a 16. We're going to be using this gray connector, 6-pin connector. 21 and newer is going to take this red connector. You got to make sure and tell us what year your bike is so we send you the right connector out. This is an expensive connector. We don't just send it out unless you have a 21 or newer. All right, so once you've downloaded the software from technoresearch.com, you go to menu and support and you download the software suite that's needed for your computer. You're going to get that loaded up on your computer and you're going to open up, it's called the Techno Research Launcher. It is going to have to be connected to the internet. That's how it's going to check your license. It's how it's going to know this is legitimate. It's going to check for updates every time. It looks like there's a new update, which we're going to skip at this time. All right, so once you've clicked for your Techno Research Launcher and you bring up your software, you're going to see a screen similar to this. And you're going to click on the very top tab, which is going to say Diagnostic and Centurion. When you click on that, it's going to look for the equipment. So you're going to want to have this plugged into your computer. Let me go ahead and plug in our equipment and get us ready. It plugs in a USB port. That USB is then going to plug into your little launcher tool. And from there, you're going to plug in the appropriate connector to plug into your bike. So I'm going to accept. You might want to read this, but you're going to accept their policies, select the correct language, and then it's going to bring you to the next screen. All right, so this is where we want to be. When you've gotten here, you're almost done. So this is very simple from this point. Now there are a lot of options on this screen for different flashes, and sometimes this confuses people. It's really easy. I'm going to send you a piece of paper. On that piece of paper is going to be a picture of the screen and tell you exactly which one to do. Later, I'll shoot a video and I'll go over what they all do, but all you need to know is there's one that works better than all the rest. If you select that one, it's going to turn on your rear speakers and correct the EQ and the radio all at the same time. Now, that particular flash, if you scroll down on this main screen, is going to be for a 6-speaker boom audio system. I know you're going 6-speaker. You just said we're installing 2. It doesn't matter how many speakers you're putting on your bike. All we're doing is setting a new EQ in the radio, changing the output gain so that it's clean. And with this particular flash, none of this changes when you start your bike. Some of these flashes are going to actually change when the bike's running. So if you'll go down on the screen and you'll find 6-speaker, 2 amplifier. It's going to say upper fairing, lower fairing, and saddlebag. You're going to select that on the screen. Once you've got this is plugged into the port on the bike's ignition's turned on. Let's go through it. Let me go ahead and connect it and I'll show you how this works. All right, it was that easy. Just plugged it in, turned the ignition on. I've selected the 6-speaker, 2 amplifier, upper, lower fairing, saddlebag, 2 amp flash. This is under default. This is from Harley. This is what would have happened if you had their boom audio system. You have options to do Kicker, Rockford, Sounds, other brands. If you do those, you're going to have too much bass. It's going to be distorted. It's not going to be loud and clear when you're done. So under default, which is the Harley preset settings, Again, 6 speaker, upper, lower, rear saddlebag, 2 amp flash. Select that, press this little hand button, click on that. You're going to see a message. It's going to say setting. So with a little bit of delay, you see it now says setting. It will say pass when it's done. All right, so once you've passed and you see this notification, you're going to turn the ignition off. You're going to follow the directions on the screen, wait 13 seconds or longer, and then turn your ignition back on. All this is doing is just resetting the radio, so let's do that. All right, so I've waited longer than 13 seconds. Now I want to show you something else. If you have a GT radio, the bike we're working on today is the older GT radio. This is all you have to do. Now if you have a GTS, that is the new full touch screen. Normally it's on a 19 or newer Harley. You have the ability to do Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but from Harley it is not turned on. While you're doing this process, I would go ahead and go up to this upper tab where it says speaker configuration and go down to audio outputs and nav. Now ignore all the rest of this because all of this has been set with our flash, so don't change anything else. Don't try to turn on amp 1 or amp 2 or any other feature, but go over to where it says Bluetooth and click the hand, and then you want to click WIM, and it's going to actually turn on the WIM. When you do that, it's going to make your Apple CarPlay work without a WIM installed in your bike, without having to plug in a headset. It's going to, anytime that you use a good automotive grade cable, plug in an iPhone or an Android device, you're going to get Apple CarPlay or Android Auto up on your radio. By renting this tool, you're also turning on that feature if you just do these additional steps. So there's no extra charge for that. So you'd pick WIM, tell it to connect, same thing, it says setting, your Apple CarPlay is going to be on. So take the time and do that while you've already got it connected. All right, so we flashed our radio. It is that simple. Now let's move on and do the rest of the install. All right, so I want to take a minute and want to go over what you're going to get from us when you buy a Stage 2 2-speaker kit. Now I see a lot of companies on the internet selling these speakers in their kit. And I will tell you, these are the best speaker you can put in your Harley. We can sell any brand. Any one of these companies would love for us to sell their product. But from listening to all of them, we feel this is by far the best speaker, especially for its price point. So it's the most efficient, it's loudest, it's clearest, and at its price point, nothing even comes close. And you don't have to do any modification to the bike. It's going to fit right into the rear tour pack, right into the front speaker locations. We don't have to cut the back of the pod out. There is no altering that has to be done to your Harley for this to work. So let's open up and look at them. You're going to get a set of SX165 Neo Hertz 6.5-inch speakers. These speakers were built specifically for a Harley. They are waterproof. If they get wet, they're not going to get hurt. And we're not going to sell any speaker for a Harley that's not waterproof. I see all over the internet people are selling car speakers for Harley Davidsons. They're not going to last. You're wasting your money. So this is the speaker you're going to get. It's got a loudspeaker style cone, so it's very efficient, very loud. Neodymium magnet, which is a very expensive magnet, much more powerful than the original speaker that came in the Harley, but yet still compact so it fits well. And it's going to have the correct terminals we need to hook up to the bike, and we're not going to have to worry about those coming loose. So you're going to get a pair of these. You're also going to get an amplifier. Now I'm real proud of our amp. The Hertz amplifier is a 600 watt max power amplifier. If you compared this to a boom audio amp, the stock boom amps are about 300 watts each, or the Rockford amp in the 21 model, their new awesome amp, is 400 watts. So this is a 600 watt amp, which is quite a bit larger. And when we do our CVOs that normally would have had 3 amplifiers in them, we take all 3 amps out, replace them with this 1 amp, and we get significant cleaner, louder sound than we would have had with the 3 amps. On top of that, it pulls less than 20 amps of current, where the stock amplifiers pull 30 amps each. So we're going from 90 amps of current pull to under 20. Your battery's going to be happy and your charging system too. So when you get this and you open it up, you're going to have a piece of paper. It's going to say, "Look at me." Read this. There's some information in here, some pictures on which flash to do, how to connect our amp turn-on wire. It's going to be very helpful. This is the only place you want to go for information other than this video. Now inside of here, you're going to get your Hertz amplifier. Now, if you were to buy an amp elsewhere, you're just going to get the amp. You're not going to have any of the wiring. We actually pre-wire this. It has a T-harness that plugs directly into the back of your radio. So if you unplugged your stock Harley radio, this plugs in, original wiring plugs in here, and at the same time we have wired up our front and rear speakers, and we're getting about 5 volts of input signal. A lot of other companies are just tapping the front speaker wires and using a cheap $20 line output converter, and you're going to get less than a volt of input signal that way. What that means is your amplifier is not being fed enough power on the input side, and therefore it's not amplifying it enough. We've come up with the best way to put this in your Harley without modifying any wiring, getting the best signal, and doing front and rear speakers. Even if you're not going to do rear speakers now, it's going to be already set up and pre-wired. You're also going to find that on the other side of the amplifier, we already have our amp turn-on wire along with our power and ground that runs all the way back to the battery pre-wired to the amplifier. So you don't have to have any electrical tools to crimp, to heat shrink. You're not going to have to come up with tape to wrap all of it with. All of that's done by us with copper wire correctly fused. No worries of fires or issues in the future from something being done incorrectly. So this, I'm proud of this. This is a lot of money and parts and a lot of time on our end that we're going to do, which is going to save you several hours on your install. So I just talked about the rear speakers and the ability to add them on. So if you have rear tour pack speakers already, this is going to have them wired in. You don't have to buy any other parts. There's nothing else to plug in. If you don't have rear speakers, you will have a plug-in in the fairing that this harness, it is optional, but I recommend you go ahead and buy it because it's easy to install while you're already doing this kit. One end is going to plug in at the fairing. The other end you just run down underneath your seat. Later we have 2 other harnesses, a tour pack harness or a saddlebag harness that's going to plug into this and allow you to hook up your rear speakers. It makes it pretty much foolproof. It's already wrapped. It's already just like the Harley connectors, and it's all watertight. So you see here, you're going to get a pair of speakers, the best that we can give you anywhere near this price point. One of the best amplifiers you can get from Hertz. We didn't cheap out and use a low quality amp that pulls a ton of power and is going to fail over and over. By using a good amp with good speakers, we're going to have great results. You can't just take good speakers and put a low cost, low quality amp on them and expect to be happy. So this is everything you're going to get. It's very simple. Now let's go over, let's take our bike apart, let's put them in and show you how to do the next step. All right, so now that we flashed the radio, I'm going to go ahead and put the side cover back on, and we're going to put our side bag back on as well in preparation for the next step. Next, we're going to pull our seat and our gas tank. Then we'll move up and take the fairing apart. Side cover just presses on, line up with the correct holes in the side of the frame. All right, side cover and bags back on. Now, in this case, we're going to use a Phillips screwdriver. We're going to take the screw that's holding the seat out. So now we're going to remove our gas tank. Now, I was told by the owner of this that he already has lights ran under the tank. If you do as well, make sure you unplug those before you proceed. We don't want you to mess your lights up. All right, so there are going to be 4 bolts that hold this in. The front of the gas tank is going to have 2 rubber covers, one on each side covering the front bolts. They're going to be a 13 millimeter in size, and we're going to have 2 more here in the back. We're also going to have a gas tank vent that we're going to have to disconnect. On some bikes, you have an additional one that runs down this side of the bike. It just gets zip tied down, so undo that one. This particular bike does not have that option. And we're going to unplug our sending unit for our fuel gauge. Now on the side of the gas tank, let me grab some gloves. I don't want to get gas on my hands here. We're going to have to quick disconnect this fuel tank. All right, so there's a quick disconnect on the side of the tank. You'll see there is normally a chrome colored or silver colored sleeve. You just push it up toward the tank. And that's going to release your fuel line and pull down on the fuel line, and you're disconnected. Make sure at the end you plug that back up or your bike won't start. All right, so we're going to remove our 4 bolts. 2 at the rear of the tank, 2 at the front. right, so those are the 4 that hold in the gas tank. But while you're here, go ahead and just take these 2 bolts out as well. They hold the battery tray in. You're going to have to access that a little later, but you've already got your tools out, so you might as well remove them. I want to make sure these lights don't have wires at the front that we have to disconnect. I don't see any. So we'll carefully lift it up and make sure we don't mess it up. Looks like we are clear. So next step, we're going to remove the cover on the backbone of the bike here. Sometimes there are some factory zip ties, other times there's factory tape that runs across. Whatever there is there, you're going to have to cut that loose and take a small screwdriver and just release the clips on this cover. All right, so now we've got us a good pathway to run our power and ground wire back to the battery from the amp, as well as that backbone harness if you decide you want to run it for your rear speakers in the future. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove our front outer fairing and get ready to mount the amplifier and change out these speakers. All right, so first I'm going to remove the 4 torque screws from the inside of the fairing. These are a T27 on this bike. As long as they're the factory screws, they should be a T27. There are 2 on each side. They are different lengths, top and bottom, so just kind of pay attention. The longer ones go at the top, the shorter one at the bottom. All right, so we've got those 4 screws out. Let's move to the front of the fairing. All right, so we're going to move to the front of the fairing. Now, before I ever take the fairing off, I put a fender protector over the fender. Way too many bikes you look at have a dent in this front fender from something that got dropped while working. Probably adding a new headlight, audio system, or whatever other accessories they're doing. So we want to cover that up. Now on this particular bike, it's got some added lights. We're going to have to unplug and make sure that we don't damage those. All we've got left, we've undone the 4 screws on the other side, are the ones across the top of the windshield. Now depending on your windshield trim, these fasteners vary greatly. On this one, the T27, the same one that did the other side, will work fine. Sometimes they're Phillips screws, sometimes they're Allen heads. Just get the appropriate socket or driver you need to remove those. Now the outer 2 ones are always short. The middle one's a long screw. Always take it out last because it really holds everything together. You don't have to worry about it falling apart or falling off if you leave that one in. Now it's going to vary a little bit if you have a road glide. You're going to have a couple screws hidden under the speaker grills. The very bottom screws on each side on the inner have to be removed as well. And there's normally 4 screws on this outer part holding your windshield and upper panel on. We'll do another video later, hopefully to cover the road glide more in depth. Try to be careful because I want to make sure I don't damage however this light is plugged in. All right. All right, so we've got those removed. A couple more lights that they've added on here. All right, now that we have our outer fairing off, we're going to remove 2 more screws holding this vent on. They're also T27s, so we're going to do that while we've got the tool out. So 1 on each side. All right, so now we're going to remove our 2 outer pods so we can change out our speakers. Let's do that next. Now on the outside perimeter, we're going to have some Allen head screws. These are a 3/16. I believe there's a total of 3 of these around the perimeter on each side. I'm going to take 2 out for now because I want to leave 1 in to hold it while I take the rest of the other fasteners out. So 2 of the 3 are out, the other one's right up here in this corner. I'm going to break it loose but not remove it. Next we have 2 fasteners that hold the upper radio plate to the pod. We'll get those. so using a panel tool or a pair of side cutters, just pop each one of the connectors loose that are going to this pod. We're also going to unplug the gauges on each side. Remember to plug those back up as you go back together. Save yourself some trouble later. Use a small screwdriver to do that. All right, so the reason we're unplugging these gauges are we're doing this to get a little bit more room to get to this first fastener that's holding the pod up on each side. So now that we've got that out of our way, we can access those bolts good. These two are a 9/64 Allen head. So if you've got a set like we do, you're going to use that the previous size, and then the one right below it is the 5/32. All right, now that we have those two out, we're going to get to the three, what I feel are the harder bolts to access. There are 3 11 millimeters or 7/16 headed bolts that are holding this pod to this metal framework. I found if you will buy a wobble socket, so this is an 11 millimeter directly on a wobble, that you can get in here pretty easily. If you stack an 11 on a wobble, it's too long. So I've tried this with a 3/8 or 1/4 inch drive, both of which have given me good access to these bolts and caused us a lot less grief. That's 2 down. Let's get to the harder one in the back. All right, so if you do not have an 11 millimeter or 7/16 wobble socket, I have also found that if you go ahead and remove this upper radio plate, pull the radio out, and then pull the plastic tray under the radio out, you can get on this with a standard set of sockets. So I've got all 3 of those bolts out. I'm going to take our last Allen head out and we'll remove this pod. All right, so you'll do that exact same process on the other side. 3 perimeter bolts, 2 up here at the top, the 3 that are on the framework to take this pod off. All right, so we've got the pod off on the counter. I want to show you how to get this speaker out. It's only 4 Torx screws. They are a T25 instead of the 27 that we used on the fairing. We'll use these exact same screws to put our new speakers back in. Now I thought this might be an aftermarket speaker, but I think it could be an earlier Harley speaker as well. More like the in between the Boom 1 and the very entry level speakers. So we got those 4 screws out. Nope, I was wrong. Hog tunes. So it looks very much like a factory speaker because of what it is. We're going to disconnect our positive and negative terminals. All right, so I want to point out something about, well, this speaker does not have a neodymium magnet. Probably why it wasn't really loud when we listened to it to begin with, on top of the fact it did not have an amplifier. But let's talk about wiring here because I want to make sure we get this right. When you pull out the stock speaker or whatever speaker's in there, you're going to have a black larger terminal and a white somewhat smaller terminal. Now, if you just go to plug these into our speaker, you're going to find out that they go on, but you can easily pull them off. We don't want that to happen because the vibration of the bike, eventually they're going to come unplugged. There's a chance of it, and we don't want you to have to pull your bike back apart to hook up a speaker. So take a pair of pliers. I normally use just a smaller pair of needle nose pliers, and I'll grab the outer side of this and I squeeze it. You'll see there's some little metal prongs inside, and they're going to collapse a little tighter. It's going to make sure your speaker doesn't come unplugged. The black one, the larger plug, is the negative. That's completely backwards from everything else that has speakers in it. Just about every other situation, the large plug is the positive. But again, the black large plug is the negative, and we're going to use the 2 terminals that are closer to the magnet to plug these in. So the black one will go on the negative post. We want to plug that on, and then we want to make sure it doesn't easily come unplugged. If you can't easily unplug it, you're good. The white one goes on the positive post. Both of these are marked. Positive has a plus sign. The negative has a minus sign on the side of the speaker. So like I said before, this is the exact size, exact drop-in speaker, and it will go right in this hole and use those same fasteners. So we're wired now. Let's get this thing screwed back in and get it back on the bike. All right, let's get it bolted back on. All right, so we took our other pod off. We put our new speaker in it. Both Hertz speakers are now installed. Pods are back on. So we've put the outer perimeter Allen head screws back in, the 2 at the top of the amp plate, and the 3 from underneath. Now, I come behind a lot of other builds where people decided it didn't need all the bolts. This is a Harley, there's a lot of vibration, and this is the strength of your fairing and what keeps it from vibrating and moving around. So put all the bolts back in. Take the time it takes to do it right. After that, make sure you plug your gauges back in. We want to make sure that they're back where they're supposed to be. All the wiring is back in its holders, and go ahead and plug your front speaker pods back into place. So we unplugged those to get them loose. Let's make sure we get all of that reconnected. Our next step is going to be mounting the amp, plugging it into the radio, and we're going to run the power wire under the gas tank to the back. I want to point out something real quick. So we haven't moved any of this upper harnessing yet. I am going to move the navigation antenna up to where the satellite antenna would be if it had sat radio. That's going to clear off the area where we're going to put our amp. But from the factory, we have 3 other connectors here on top. Now, one of these, you could have added a WIM and it would have plugged in. Not sure what the third one is, but for sure this black connector with 4 wires in it that are blue, this is the rear speaker harness. So if you get the backbone harness, it's a $45 option, but I think you should run it while you're doing this. So in the future, you don't have to pull the gas tank again, you don't have to pull the backbone cover again, and you're not going to have to pull the fairing again when you decide to add rear speakers. We're going to have all of this already set. So plug in the rear harness, route it right back with your power and ground toward the battery, leave it under the seat, which you'll see us do that here in just a couple minutes. But this is the backbone harness connector. Sometimes people have a hard time finding this. Now, keep in mind, if you had factory boom audio, boom stage 2, or if you had rear tour pack factory, this connector is not going to be in the upper harness, especially if those things were factory installed. Now, if it's add-on boom audio or Rockford Fosgate, this connector is going to be in here and you're going to be able to find it. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and move this antenna, clean this to put our amp in place, and then we'll route our harnessing. Now, if you have a nav antenna in this spot, take a pry tool of some sort, a screwdriver or whatever, and just release this double-sided tape that's underneath it so that you can move that. That's where we're going to put our amp. There's plenty of lead on this normally just to move it up here. It's going to pick up fine up here at the top. All right, so normally I use rubbing alcohol and I clean this amp plate with the alcohol. Or the radio plate. It's going to be the amp plate when we're done. This is going to give us a good place for Velcro to stick, because I'm going to put a little Velcro on the bottom of the amp. The amp would probably hang out in here just fine without it, but we don't want it to vibrate around and rub the inside of the fairing. All right, so if you have a road glide, I know this is a street glide, but if you had a road glide, the amp would actually mount under the radio. We send out a road glide specific amp bracket that bolts the 4 factory locations underneath the radio. On a street glide, our amp is going to fit perfect right across the top on this factory plate. So we bolt in the road glide one because it hangs under the radio, and we use Velcro to secure the one in the street glide. Ooh. All right, so we've cleaned the underside of this with some alcohol. I've applied some Velcro to the back of our amp. If you're going to do it in this manner, which I suggest you do, don't cover the serial number on the amp. If we ever have to warranty it, and yes, it's 3-year warranted, but if we had to warranty it, we need access to that serial number. If you put your tape or your Velcro over that, when it pulls off, it's going to deface that. We don't want that. So we're going to take our amplifier. We're going to put it on this plate, just like so. So it's got a good sturdy place there, that's now secured. Our Hertz logo is facing you correctly. That puts the input side, all your adjustments are pointed this direction. You won't have to do any adjustments. We've preset everything on the amplifier. So normally, if we had not done that, you would need a DD1 distortion detector to set those gains properly. If you have an older install, you're watching this video and you're going, I need to set that. We have another video on how to set amp gains, and we rent that tool to you if you need it as well. All right, so now we're looking at the back of our radio. We're going to unplug our big main Harley connector. Now there's a little button you push in, and then you rotate this tab over to release the plug. When you rotate that, it's going to come loose. Now we're going to have the same exact connector on our harness, and you simply take it and you put it in just like you would the original radio connector. Swing that connector, pushing in as you go. So now we have all the wiring that was plugged in before, plugged into the back of the radio. We have the other side of our T. Now normally I would take this wiring and I put it up beside the radio. If it's on a road glide, all this wiring is going to go pretty much behind the headlight. A little bit of it's going to go on top of it. But we'll run it up through here and plug it up as well. So here in a few minutes after I get the other parts around, I'm going to zip tie all of these wires across through here, leaving room for the headlight, room for the fairing to go back on. We're also going to connect in our rear backbone harness for the future addition of rear speakers. Now, if you did get a rear speaker kit from us as well and you're just watching this video, no problem. It's very simple to add on the TruePack speakers or our lids with our plug-and-play harnessing for that as well. All right, so that's installed. Now on the other end of our amplifier, we still have our amp turn-on wire and our battery power and ground connections. So we're going to run this back through down the side of our frame rail. You could take this fuse holder off if you want to try to run through this little factory cover. We're going to run on the outside and zip tie around it just for this video. It's up to you. We've already got the amp. The fuse holder is installed with the fuse in it, so we're going to connect that last to the battery. Let's feed that down the side of the frame. We're also going to route this one blue wire up toward the top. We're going to end up connecting this to around the top and over to where the cigarette lighter connector is. That connection's right here behind this gauge, and there's going to be a purple wire with a blue stripe we'll talk about here in a minute when we connect it up. All right, let me get our backbone harness. All right, so this is that backbone harness I've been speaking of. This just does rear speakers. We're going to have a connector that plugs right in here. Very simple watertight connector. Route that as well into the side of the frame over here. Now you're going to want to leave a little bit of extra lead up here in the fairing because on a Streetglide, you know, your fairing does move and these wires need a little bit of room to be able to move with it. All right, so let's move to the other side and we'll go ahead and route this over to the battery. All right, so we're going to take the wire we just routed out here. We're going to pull it up to this backbone area of the bike. All right, so I'm going to put it in here. Now we're going to send you a handful of zip ties with this amplifier, and you're going to want to secure this wiring down the side right here behind at the beginning of the fairing here at the backbone. Okay, I also normally add a few more zip ties inside of the backbone here. So we're going to just pull up some of this wiring. Put a zip tie around it just to hold it in place as we go together. This is going to keep these wires from trying to come out as we're putting the cover on. Take a zip tie cutter and we're going to flush cut these zip ties. Then let's reinstall our cover here. Now be careful and watch the factory wiring to make sure it's all still back where it's supposed to go inside. All right, everything's snapped back in. I'm going to go ahead and put our gas tank back on, and then we'll connect up to the battery. Go ahead and start all the bolts before you tighten the first one. All right, so don't forget to put the rubber covers back on the front bolts. All right, so both of those are installed. I want to reconnect our fuel level sender. Just going to plug back in our lights that were under our tank. And last but not least, our vent here. I'm going to go ahead and hook up our fuel line so we don't forget that later as well. So to do that, just like we removed it, take that metal sleeve, push it up toward the tank, put the line in, and you'll see that sleeve click back down. Now it's secure and it won't leak. Next, we'll connect up to our battery. All right, so our gas tank's back on. We're going to pull the battery tray, the cover off the battery. So we're going to move our ECM to the side. There's a few connectors here. It's labeled actually on here where they go. It's very nice. We took our 2 bolts out earlier when we were doing our gas tank. So now we're just going to have to take this plastic cover off. It slides forward and up and over a little loop. We've got that off. Now, our power and ground that we send you. It's going to have a fuse holder attached to the one that goes to the battery positive, and just a loop already installed on the negative. The negative is the black wire, blue is the positive. So on this particular one, we have a big Phillips headed bolt that we're going to take off to connect our negative cable. Make sure you get these very tight, and we don't want them to vibrate loose in the future. Now we're going to leave you a little extra lead because we don't know exactly how you're going to route this back here. Everybody does it a little different, and by doing so, you may need more wires. So what excess you have, you just tuck in here inside the battery box before we put the cover back on. All right, so let's put our plastic cover back on where it was. This is much easier if you don't have add-on lights like this one has. It's taking up a lot of the room that normally would go around the battery with a lot of additional connectors. So depending on your accessories as to how difficult this may be. All right, let's get the cover back in place. Get the ECM back where it goes. The engine control module. And then let's put our other connectors where they go. It's labeled black and gray, so let's put those back in. All right, so like I said, this one has a few extra connectors from all their lights, but it should be very similar to the same process you're going to do. Now we did add, as we spoke about earlier, the backbone harness. Now if you're going to have rear speakers at this point, you may want to go ahead and wire in your Y harness for the rear. But in this case, this was just for future purposes. We're going to go ahead and bundle this here next to the battery. I'm going to put a zip tie around it, so it's kind of out of the way until it's needed. All right, at this point I'm going to go ahead and put our seat back on. All right, so we're getting really close to being done. All we have to do now is hook up our amp turn-on wire, do a little bit of wire management in the fairing with some more zip ties, put it together and take a listen. So let's move back to the front. All right, so as with probably what you're going to do, there'll be times you forget things. The 2 battery bolts we had not put in yet, so took the seat back off, going to put it back together. All right, good to go. All right, so we're connected to the battery. Our next step is going to be connecting our amp turn-on wire. It's going to be the blue wire that we leave off here. I want to show you where to do that. So in a Streetglide or a Road Glide, there is a 2-wire connector that is basically just an ignition feed connector. Like in this bike, that has some additional lights that they've added. They're like a daytime running light. They come on anytime the ignition's on. It's already plugged into that. Also, the cigarette lighter normally plugs into this same connector. So this, you'll know you have the right wire because it'll be purple with a blue stripe. It's located on either side of the fairing. On a Road Glide, it's on the left side of the bike. On a Streetglide, it's on the right side. We're going to send you a little red connector. It's called a posi lock. This is much better than any kind of T-tap. And all you do is take the black end off of it and slide the wire where the wire is in the middle of the connector. Take the red connector and screw it down on here. Now as you do that, you'll see there's a little needle end in this red connector that pierces into the wire. So once you tighten that up, it is securely locked on. And now you'll loosen the other, there's a red cap on the end you're going to want to loosen up. I'm going to show you what we're going to do here. We're going to take our turn on wire, and you're going to want to strip just a little bit of the insulation off the end of it. So you've got your copper wire exposed. Stick that, after you've loosened this, stick it down in this hole, push, and then tighten that connector back. As you tighten the end, it's going to actually sandwich those copper wires right onto the middle pole of it, and you're secure. So no special tools needed. We didn't cut a wire in the bike, we just tapped right onto it. This is the most secure way of doing what some people would call a T-tap, but it actually threads and locks on. It's called a posi-lock connection. So you'll want to use that connector and tie it in. Now our amp will turn on when our ignition turns on. So a little bit of wire management, and let's go back together and listen to it. All right, so I'm just going to take a few more zip ties and start securing this wiring where I would like for it to be in the fairing. And you'll do that by wrapping around other existing wires or other metal points that you can get your wire tie wrapped around. When you do zip ties, always flush cut them. Nobody likes to get cut later by somebody's zip tie that they did not flush cut. All right, so one thing we didn't talk about earlier, we always have a DSP connector on our harness. Now, there are very few times in which a DSP would be beneficial. It does take more knowledge, more tools to set it up properly. I think what we're doing does an excellent job without a DSP. But that connector is on the harness. Just ignore it. You will not be using it for this install. Just leave it up here in the fairing in case at some point we wanted to add one. We wanted to leave it wired on. If you're not going to be doing sound competitions and you just want an amazing sounding radio with the least number of things to fail, you do not need a DSP. All right, so I feel like we've got everything wired up here pretty good. Put our nav antenna back up here we're going to have at the top. Next, we're going to put our vent back on, then we're going to put our outer fairing back on. Well, you know, get ahead of myself. You probably want to listen to it and make sure that everything you've done is correct before you put it together. I've done this 100 times, so I'm sure it's going to work. We're going to turn it on and test it real quick, then we'll reassemble the rest of it. The volume's down. I'm just waiting for our Bluetooth to connect. If you have a GT radio, you know how long this process takes. Well, it's loud, it's clear. Now it's time for us to put it back together. All right, let's put our vent back in place. Same T27 Torx screws to hold the outer fairing on. These are going to be the two short ones that you had left over from earlier. They also have a built-in washer if you're trying to figure out which one they are. All right, so this outer fairing has a lot going on. He's got a lot of additional lighting. Make sure I get it all plugged back up. Most of the time there's just one headlight connector. Sometimes there are two additional connectors for turn signals. All right, so we've got everything plugged in, lined back up. I always start, like I said, one long bolt first. Once you have it in, it can't fall off. Let's get our windshield started. We'll put our two outer screws in. Be real careful to make sure you got the windshield where it goes before you tighten anything up, because they're very easy to scratch. Let's get that one started. You always want to use hand tools when doing these. You don't want to get them cross-threaded. You can tell really quickly if they're not going in easy when you're doing it by hand. So I've got all these started. I'm not going to tighten them up till the end once we get all of our side ones as well started. Now, if you remember, our longer bolts are going to go at the top. Shorter bolts are going to go at the bottom. If anything doesn't seem to line up or it's fighting you, you may have a harness in a wrong place. Just take it back off and readjust your wiring so that it's out of the way. These are lining up just fine. All right, now that those four are in and tight, we'll go back across the ones at the windshield, making sure it's adjusted where it's supposed to go. All right, so you've seen it start to finish. It's not that complicated. All the hard parts we try to do before you ever get the kit. If you can follow along with this video and you can do these steps, you can have an amazing audio system. So we're gonna move back over, fire up the computer, do another test with our RTA and try to see how much SPL we get out of this system. It's hard to tell on YouTube how loud something is, but hopefully this will show you with a meter. All right, so now's the time. Here's the best part. Everybody enjoys the part when we're done. So 2 hours ago, we started this bike, and right before, did a few measurements with my RTA using the SPL function to see how loud the original radio was. At the time, I didn't know what kind of speakers were in it. I knew they weren't factory just from looking through the grill, but they ended up being hog-tuned speakers. They didn't have an amp, so I'm not going to rag on them too much. It didn't really have any chance of being loud. But we do have our Hertz SX165 Neos installed. I know they're the most efficient and some of the loudest speakers we can put in your Harley. We do have our Hertz HMP 4D amplifier in. It is a 600 watt amp. So we're getting a tremendous amount of power compared to the stock radio without an amp. So if you remember back, it was somewhere around 84, 83 decibel 2 hours ago. We'll probably merge this video together where it's a little closer so you can tell better. But for every 3 decibel that we see our mic increase, it's actually twice as loud to our ears. So let's see what kind of readings we get and how much louder it seems now that we're done. So we're going to play the exact same track, and we're just going to start in here and see how loud it is. Wow, that's a big difference. So earlier I could almost talk over it. If we were standing here together, we could have had a conversation while playing the radio at full volume. So most people tell us the reason they're doing this is it's not loud enough while riding. And when they try to make it loud enough, it's not clear. It's muffled, it's distorted. This is completely clear even at those high volumes. I hope that's coming through in this video. But this is something we can show you. So on our computer at peak hold, we made 96.9 decibel. So my math is a little fuzzy here, but that's something about 14, almost 15 decibel more than our earlier measurements. That's at least 4 times louder. So if you're wondering if you're going to be able to hear it going down the road, most of our customers wear full face helmets, they have straight pop exhaust. We never have anybody say, I can't hear it, or it's not loud enough. All they ever say is, wow, I can't believe how loud it is and how much better it is than it was stock. So as you saw, it took me about 2 hours. I would plan a little bit more time. I've done this over and over, but hopefully by watching this video, you save a few of the mistakes that other people would make, and you don't miss out on some of these steps that we've done here. So once you get the program loaded in your computer to flash your bike, I think realistically probably about 3 hours with the information we've given you, you should be able to tackle this project and get it done. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed our video. I hope it made things better for you. I hope you enjoy your bike better. I hope that you've learned more about an audio system and can make a more educated decision on what you're going to put in your bike. If you liked it, definitely like this video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos on Harleys, on audio, on other accessories that we may have that you can put in your bike. Thank you, and God bless. Have a good day.